Just imagine that you are walking down the street and a person comes up to you and offers to give you the most amazing and delicious meal that you could possibly think of, and asks if you would want to accept it. After you hear the story that I am going to tell you today, I know for a fact that I definitely would not accept it, and I have a very strong feeling that you are going to feel the exact same way very soon. While we are getting through the story for today, I am also going to keep working on building a storage area in my Minecraft game. So without wasting any more time, let us just dive right into the story. This specific story comes from the r/NoSleep subreddit on the internet, and it was posted by a user named More Tanks. And the title of the story is, I went to a free meal for the homeless. I should have stayed hungry. For a total of 7 long years, I have been living my life out on the cold streets, enduring 7 long years of dealing with the snow, the bitter cold weather, the oppressive and heavy heat, and all the harsh storms that come with it. I am really no different from anyone else. Just one single person among countless other homeless individuals who are all facing the exact same hardships and difficulties in life. Some situations are a lot more dire and terrible than others, and some are a little bit less bad, but we all share the same struggle. People find themselves in this very difficult predicament for a million different reasons, like having physical illnesses, dealing with mental health struggles, or simply being completely cut off from any normal life, going from being an average person who works a boring week to just existing and waiting until the weekend comes. 7 years ago, my entire life completely fell apart and unraveled within just a single month. One day, I was completely consumed by a lot of stress from my workplace, and the very next day, my mind simply fractured and broke. My employer's business suddenly shut down and closed unexpectedly, and suddenly, I was left drifting without a job, needing to find new employment to survive. But that was not the absolute lowest point of my despair. My parents' home was completely engulfed in a massive fire. They perished in the terrible inferno, and I completely shattered inside. Sleep became an absolute impossibility for me, as I was constantly battling crippling and terrifying panic attacks. My girlfriend at the time tried to endure my suffering for a couple of weeks, but I always sensed that her affection lacked the deep love needed to sustain a long-term commitment. True to my premonition, she departed and left me at the earliest opportunity she could find. I was left utterly and completely alone with all my troubles and my inner demons, and ultimately, I was left with absolutely nothing but a meager bag of my possessions, untreated post-traumatic stress disorder, and a mild paranoid personality disorder, which is exactly how I ended up with absolutely nothing at all. So, I just resigned myself to a life on the streets, and over time, I completely withdrew from society. I learned to trust neither people nor circumstances, because being alone offered me a strange sense of solace, since at least I could depend on myself. Recently, as the weather started to improve and get warmer, I have been spending my mornings sitting in a nearby park, which is conveniently located very close to the underpass where I sleep each night. The tranquil, tree-filled area offered a very calming presence, especially during the daylight hours when most normal people were occupied with their regular jobs. The park's visitors were limited to just a few elderly individuals taking slow, leisurely strolls and a small handful of mothers walking with their children. I spent my time observing the local bird population, noting several magpies and pigeons foraging for food on the ground, and the entire scene felt exactly like a contemporary still life painting. It was precisely at that moment that he approached me and disrupted the peaceful scene, while the gentle sunlight was warming my face. My hand instinctively reached for the dull pocket knife that I kept hidden in my jacket, a knife I cannot recall how I acquired and have never actually used, but its presence always offered me a measure of reassurance and safety. "Good afternoon, my friend," the stranger said as he positioned himself right beside me. The sun was shining too intensely for me to clearly discern his facial features, but his attire was very striking, consisting of a pristine, immaculate white ensemble, which was a stark contrast to my threadbare jacket and jeans that looked incredibly ancient. "What is your name, my friend?" he inquired, and then he sat down directly right beside me on the bench. I was rendered completely speechless and thought to myself, what on earth is this man doing? I thought, I am a disheveled, foul-smelling homeless individual. My beard is unkempt. My hair is a total mess. I am as grimy as a stray animal, and he just plops down right next to me. "Can I assist you with something?" I managed to ask, keeping my voice low and raspy. I made an effort to appear even more intimidating and scary, hoping he would reconsider his decision and just leave me be. He was practically shoulder to shoulder with me now, and his face was tanned, exuding an aura of cheerfulness and friendliness. His eyes were dark, yet they possessed a soft, gentle luminescence, and I recognized his type immediately because I had encountered numerous individuals exactly like him over the years. I released my grip on the knife in my pocket and returned my attention to watching the birds. "My friend, I am the one here to offer you assistance," he said in a very gentle tone. "Accompany me, and we can provide you with clean clothing, a warm meal, and medical attention, because I am confident you require something." "Who are you affiliated with?" I asked in a dismissive tone. I have never cared for these religious groups, because while they often offer help, there is always a hidden price, like having to sit through their sermons, hand out pamphlets, or recruit more homeless individuals, which was never my preference. "Come with me and I will show you, my friend," he replied after a brief pause. "I will decline, thank you," I responded curtly. The man in the immaculate white attire simply smiled, as if I had said something very amusing. "Very well, my friend," he said a few seconds later. "We are located just beyond the park, so should you reconsider, please visit us, because we serve lunch and dinner as well." My stomach rumbled audibly, though I highly doubt he heard it, and I remained perfectly still, akin to a predatory animal poised to strike. Yet it wasn't aggression. It was sheer terror, the paralyzing kind one experiences when witnessing a terrible car accident, rendering them completely immobile. The man rose from the bench, stretched his arms up toward the sky, and exhaled with evident satisfaction as he basked in the sunlight. "Here, take this, at least," he said, presenting me with a small package. "Something to eat, my friend, and our contact information in case you change your mind, so you will know exactly where to find us." Then, with a final, benevolent smile, he departed and walked away. I set the small package aside because I was too wary to consume its contents, and my gaze remained fixed on the entrance, where the wide double doors stood ajar, resembling the entrance to a large concert venue. However, instead of security personnel or ticket scanners, there were a few cheerful individuals clad entirely in white standing outside. Homeless individuals were arriving, perhaps a dozen of them, and those in white greeted the disheveled street dwellers with warm smiles, ushering them inside as if they were long-lost family members. I was very hesitant to enter without knowing what was waiting for me inside, because my nature demanded clarity and I needed to observe and ascertain who was inside and what the circumstances entailed. However, hunger had been a persistent companion since the previous day, and while I could procure water from the park's fountain, getting sustenance and a proper meal was a very distant memory. Meanwhile, the group of homeless individuals was being guided through the open doors, and their worn-out figures expressed profuse gratitude for the kindness being shown to them. There was an unsettling aspect to the establishment, but I had encountered similar soup kitchens over the years, most of which were tied to some form of religious obligation, so I assumed this would be no different. I decided I would enter, eat, and depart, because I required nothing further from them. As I emerged from behind the shrubbery, I practically collided with a familiar face. "Noah?" the thin, bearded man with a single eye inquired, but I offered no response because I recognized him and was not in the mood for interaction. I was already grappling with an unwelcome situation, and now he had to appear as well. "Noah, it is me, Colton, do you remember me?" he said, moving closer to me. Colton was a decent fellow, as much as a one-armed, one-eyed veteran could be, and his circumstances were even more dire than mine. His return from Iraq had only exacerbated his troubles, as he had the misfortune of losing his arm to his own grenade, which also impaired his vision. No medals, no accolades, and no heroic narrative awaited him back home, only obscurity and the streets. "Yes, Colton," I replied flatly. "I know who you are." "Ah," he exclaimed, his voice loud enough to draw the attention of passers-by. "That is what I like to hear. So where are you headed and what is new with you these days?" I hesitated to respond because what bothered me more was the continued attention from the onlookers, ordinary people staring and judging us. Then, the situation escalated when two of the figures in white waved in our direction, and the third was already approaching with a smile on his face. "Colton, "This is not how this was supposed to happen," I said, and we entered together. The man continued to chatter incessantly, seemingly without drawing a breath, though I was not truly listening. As we followed one of the individuals in white, I attempted to discreetly survey our surroundings, pulling my grimy hood over my head not because it was cold, but because it provided a sense of concealment. Even so, I saw few viable escape routes as we proceeded down a hallway lined with large, empty rooms on either side, resembling lecture halls. At the end of the corridor, the unmistakable aroma of food reached me. The smell of freshly cooked, real meat, a scent so enticing it seemed to melt in your mouth before you even took a bite. Even Colton fell silent, and I could see a flicker of recognition on his face, as if he had not encountered such a smell since his childhood. We then stepped through the doorway behind our white-clad guide and finally beheld our objective, which was a vast open space akin to a school or office cafeteria. Long tables were arranged centrally, filled with homeless individuals, and while a typical person might find the odor overwhelming, for those as famished as we were, such considerations became completely irrelevant. Most were already eating, or rather, devouring their meals, which consisted of thick, steaming stew and rich, hearty soups. Some were still in line at the serving counter, but everyone who received food obtained generous portions, and it did not feel like a soup kitchen. It felt like a fancy restaurant. Colton, like a famished wolf, hurried to the line, anticipating his turn, but there was an unsettling quality to the place, not just for my damaged psyche, but for anyone with a rational mind. It was too clean, too welcoming, and too perfect, which actually diminished my appetite. Behind me, the individual in white closed the doors, offered me a smile, and then departed for a corner where fresh clothing was being distributed. "Friend, I am glad you came," a familiar voice said, and it was the same person I had encountered earlier, the one who had led me here. I could now see his face more clearly than I had in the bright sunlight, and he appeared to be an average young man, neat and unremarkable, with his white attire still perfectly pressed. "What is this place?" I asked, glancing back towards the entrance where another individual in white was ushering in a few more homeless people. "This is love, my friend," the man from the park replied, his expression completely unchanging. "You receive food and clothing, just as I promised, because the Prince's Church keeps its word." The Prince's Church, and suspicion flickered through me as I wondered what prince, what church, who these people were, and why they were behaving this way. Only one thought resonated in my mind, which was that I needed to leave immediately. "I want to leave," I stated firmly, but he merely continued to smile, as if he had not heard me. I stared at him, growing increasingly agitated, and my hand instinctively searched for the knife in my pocket. "Hey, Noah!" Colton's voice broke the tension. "I got you some too," he said, standing at the front of the line, gesturing with his single arm, and holding two large, steaming plates of food. I merely stared at him, annoyed, because I did not want to be here. Something about this place felt wrong, and I did not want to eat or even sit down for a moment longer. The man in white maintained his smile, as if patiently awaiting my surrender. "I truly wish to depart," I reiterated more clearly. "All right, I am so sorry. I do not know if you guys are thinking it too. I do not want to sound out of pocket or anything, but if his friend with the one arm is standing, he is standing at the front of the line waving his one arm around holding two large plates of steaming food. How? Like what? Wait, how? All right, I apologize, I will continue," he said, still smiling. "Just have something to eat first, since you are already here, and after that, you can go wherever you wish." He never lost that smile, always composed, always amiable, and that persistent smile was beginning to grate on me. I almost wished he would become angry or raise his voice, because at least then I would know what I was dealing with. But how do you contend with such unwavering pleasantness? That smile felt more unnerving than any form of aggression. I moistened my dry lips, attempting to devise an escape route, a place to run, anything to get out unnoticed, and I could feel the onset of panic. The silence, the white attire, the perpetual smiles, and the strangely composed demeanor of everyone eating, as if they were not even homeless, made it worse. "How many times do I have to call you?" Colton grabbed my arm. What? I snapped out of my daze, my thoughts scattering. One of those smiling freaks helped carry our food to the table, he said, with a hint of reprimand in his tone. Come on, you can talk to them later. Okay, that makes sense, I said, and he then began to pull me along, like a child. There was a strange compulsion in his grip, in the way he propelled me forward, and despite his emaciated frame, Colton possessed considerable strength, enough so that I offered no resistance, allowing him to lead me between the tables to our seats. Colton sat opposite me at the long metal table, and to my right, a disheveled woman meticulously wiped her plate clean with her index finger, then licked the remnants of brown stew sauce with the intensity of a starving feline. The aroma of the food was overpowering. My stomach churned with a hollow ache intensifying, and never before had a hot meal seemed both so alluring and so repulsive simultaneously. Yet, neither Colton nor I ate. Do you remember? Colton inquired, his gaze fixed on the steaming food before him. The first time we met, it was at a place like this. Yes, I recall, I replied flatly. You were helpless when I saw you at that soup kitchen, he continued. You told me to leave you alone, that you did not need help. But I could see it in you, you were just another lost soul like me. His voice had an altered quality, more measured, as if for a fleeting moment he had regained some semblance of his former self. And the Colton sitting across from me was not the same man from moments before. I knew I had to help you, he stated, a faint, amiable smile gracing his lips. So you would survive out there, so you would become one of us, one of the street. I would have managed on my own, I interjected, a touch of irritation in my voice. Sure, Colton retorted. Just not as well, but tell me, do you recall what we ate back then, at that place? It must have been about 6 years ago now, something like that. I nodded. And no, I do not remember what we ate. It was stew, Colton said distantly. But not like this, I remember it distinctly. It was more like watery meat than actual stew. And the bread was hard, stale, leftovers for people like us. But this, he pressed his soiled fingers into the bread on his tray. This is thick, rich, genuine beef stew, and the bread is fresh and crisp. Why are they giving us something like this, Noah? He already suspected something. I could see it in his gaze, feel it in the subtle shift of his thoughts mid-sentence. Something was profoundly wrong here, even if the indicators were subtle. I do not know, I said quietly, but I do not want to stay here. I know, Colton nodded, but those smiling ones, I do not think they are as friendly as they appear. He inclined his head towards a group of individuals in white. Approximately 10 of them stood in the corner, entirely silent, merely smiling and observing the throng of homeless people consuming their meals. As I surveyed the room, I realized they were positioned throughout, motionless, like automatons awaiting a command. Noah, Colton leaned closer. Pretend you are eating. I believe they are watching us. As if sensing it perfectly, a shadow fell behind me in the overhead lighting. Do not you like it, friends? A young woman's voice inquired. I turned slightly, and a short-haired brunette stood behind me. Her smile was wide. Her white shirt stretched tautly over her soft, rounded form. Her teeth were flawlessly clean, a stark contrast to my own experience, and she bore a striking resemblance to someone I had worked with when my life was still conventional. Of course we do, Colton responded immediately. It is just my tooth hurts. It is difficult to chew. The woman did not seem to register his words, her smile unwavering, her gaze expectant, and I understood what she was waiting for. I scooped a generous spoonful of thick beef stew. I could not recall the last time I had seen or smelled anything remotely like it. The aroma was exquisite, the meat appeared clean and authentic. This was the kind of fare one paid for in actual restaurants, not something dispensed freely. Reluctantly, I brought the spoon to my lips and took a bite. The flavor was instantaneous. The tender meat dissolved on my tongue. The rich sauce enveloped my mouth, but I refrained from swallowing. I held it there, chewing deliberately, feigning enjoyment. The woman offered a cheerful nod and moved away. It required every ounce of my willpower not to react. My body craved the food, screaming for me to consume it, but my mind was more insistent. I spat the food out as soon as she was out of earshot. Well, Colton asked immediately, how is it? Heavenly? I replied, licking my lips. But there is something about it. I cannot quite place it. Like it was not made for us, Colton mused, as if reading my thoughts. A tray was abruptly placed to my left. An elderly man, bald and wrinkled, sat beside us. His tattered clothes hung loosely on his frame. One of us? He grunted. He did not utter another word, simply began shoveling food into his mouth with ravenous speed. I observed him intently, as did Colton. His one eye narrowed. The man's eyes widened as he ate with increasing fervor. His pupils dilated. His breathing grew ragged, and he seemed to be choking as he consumed the food. He did not pause once, as if he would gladly drown himself in the sustenance. Colton remained silent. His gaze locked on me with that peculiar half-lidded intensity. Excuse me. A voice suddenly boomed. At the cafeteria's entrance stood a figure in white, holding a microphone, tall and slender, clad in a one-piece uniform distinct from the others. Now that everyone has received their food, he announced, and you have eaten your fill, we would like to request something in return. He paused for dramatic effect, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. We ask that you listen to the revelation of the God who has provided you with this meal. Please heed the sacred words of the one true Son of the heavenly King who has descended to earth. Please listen to the prince. A hush fell over the room, but it was not a silence born of fear. It was an eager anticipation, as if everyone had been waiting for this very moment, and the food was merely a prelude. Noah! Colton tapped my hand lightly. Whatever happens, remain calm. The kitchen doors of the cafeteria burst open, the double doors flung wide by two individuals in white. My heart pounded, my mind racing, trying to anticipate what was about to unfold. How does one remain calm in such a situation? How does one avoid complete panic? I doubt anyone could have been prepared for what emerged from those doors. Two immense, partially clad men stepped out from the darkness of the kitchen, wearing only long white trousers. Their muscular torsos were adorned with numerous cuts. From my distance, I could not discern them clearly, but the wounds appeared old, healed over, as if something had been meticulously carved into their skin. They carried long poles on their shoulders, extending back into the darkness. Then, more of it came into view, a throne, solid gold with a velvet seat, and upon that throne sat a figure. The individual was draped in long white robes, the kind of fine fabric depicted on royalty in ancient artwork. He waved a hand in a gesture befitting a ruler greeting his subjects. He wore a delicate silver chain glove. His face was concealed by a silver mask, reminiscent of those worn by ancient kings or pharaohs. However, this mask did not depict a human visage. It was a lamb. A polished, gleaming lamb's face stared back at us. There were no openings in the mask, no slits, no eye holes like a death mask. Whoever wore it should have been incapable of seeing or even breathing properly. But that was not the most disturbing aspect. The crown, that was what truly shattered something within me. Severed human hands, cut cleanly at the wrists, woven together like a wreath, rose from his head, a grotesque, horrifying crown. The dried fingers stretched towards the ceiling like the branches of a dead forest. A chilling dread coursed through my veins. Every instinct screamed at me to pull my hood over my head and flee. Just run, find an exit, any way out, anything, just to escape this place. Do not move, Colton whispered urgently. Not even a fraction. Maintain your composure. I could see the terror etched on his face. His one eye twitched incessantly, restless, were it within his power. He too would flee, however. There remained no alternative, as every soul present was utterly immobile, completely silent, awaiting the ritual's progression. The prince was finally presented from the interior quarters. Two additional hulking men supported the throne's rear. All four bore nearly identical markings etched into their skin. Their countenances bore a striking resemblance, as though they were mass-produced. Upon reaching the tall individual holding the microphone, they gently set the throne upon the ground. The slender, towering man promptly knelt, extending the microphone towards the prince. The prince accepted it with a deliberate, almost weightless motion. His white garments swirled around him like mist, as if he lacked true substance. My companions, my devoted, the prince proclaimed, his voice modulated to an unnatural, resonant tone. "I have rejoined your assembly." His voice resonated throughout the expanse. I was uncertain if the mask was the cause, but its echo was profound, too profound. I perceived it within my mind more than I apprehended it with my ears, as though it belonged to no human being whatsoever. "Prostrate yourselves before me," the prince commanded with an almost regal grace. The congregation of impoverished souls rose as one. As if synchronized, Colton nudged me, and we followed suit, joining the others in kneeling. Yet a discrepancy was evident. A select few remained seated, 2, perhaps 3 individuals. It is possible they too had abstained from sustenance. "What in blazes is this?" one of them exclaimed, springing to his feet. "What is this? Some kind of jest? You offer me provisions and then expect me to bow to you? Go to hell." The man's face was crimson and swollen, clearly under the influence of drink or drugs. Such individuals were prevalent amongst us, people whose downward spiral led them to the streets. He continued to rant, spewing obscenities, gesturing wildly with his food, and overturning items. "That is sufficient," the prince's voice boomed through the microphone. "The infidels are undeserving of sustenance. They are undeserving of deliverance. Only oblivion awaits them." "What are you blathering about?" the man retorted. And in that instant, the prince's words were vindicated. The individuals kneeling beside the man turned on him with immediate ferocity, like savage beasts. They seized him, assaulted him, and dragged him towards the table. One woman lunged forward, grasped his head, and yanked it back, driving her soiled fingers directly into his eyes. The remainder of the atrocity was consumed by the throng. Perhaps that was a form of mercy. All that reached my ears were the screams, the struggle, the wet, brutal sounds, the man's shrieks akin to a pig being butchered. Colton remained impassive. He simply observed, waiting. A few moments later, it was as if their fury had dissipated. They composed themselves and calmly resumed their positions. A man with long hair was coated in blood. A woman's hand still dripped with the remnants of the man they had dismembered. The prince patiently awaited until each person had retreated to their designated spot. No one remained seated. Either they quickly assumed the kneeling posture, or they had already become sustenance. My body trembled uncontrollably. I lowered my head, my gaze fixed on the floor in terror. My thoughts ceased their frantic pace. I was no longer contemplating escape, nor seeking a means of egress. My sole desire was survival. Even the precarious existence I endured on the streets felt preferable to this. When silence once again descended, I began to perceive a peculiar sound, a metallic clatter, reminiscent of an individual struggling to rise, slow, heavy, like an elderly man forcing himself to stand upright. The sound was grating and harsh, like the friction of corroded metal. The prince slowly ascended from his gilded throne. Beneath the white fabric, it appeared as though segments of chainmail moved with him, akin to the attire of a medieval knight. Did he genuinely believe himself to be royalty's offspring? "My companions, my devoted." The prince straightened. He had not appeared so tall when seated. If anything, I would have judged him to be of average stature. Yet standing there, he seemed at least 6.5 feet tall, perhaps more. His long, slender arm extended from beneath the cloth. One hand held the microphone. The other was raised aloft, poised to address them. "Attend to my words now," he continued, his voice a deep, commanding rumble that filled the space. "You unfortunate, broken, neglected souls, the very fact of your presence here, that you embrace my benevolence, is the most fortunate occurrence imaginable for you." He paused, allowing his pronouncement to settle. Then, with the gravitas of a prophet, he stepped forward, traversing the assembled ranks. His gait was unnatural, fluid and ethereal, devoid of the stiff, mechanical movements observed when he rose. "The world cast you aside," he proceeded, gliding amongst the kneeling multitude. "A corrupted realm where status is defined by wealth, authority, and the exploitation of others. A realm where you endured hardship, where you shivered, where you starved. But it is precisely for this reason that you are here, you suffered, and without suffering, there is no redemption." He turned his gaze towards our row, towards me. My heart pounded with such intensity one feared it would rupture my ribcage. Sweat beaded on my temples, my mouth became parched. I was utterly petrified of that entity, terrified it would perceive my distinctiveness, that I was not lost within its influence, that the instant it reached me, it would unleash its followers upon me. "I have provided you with sustenance and drink," the prince stated, his voice metallic through the mask, "as prophets before me have attempted. But this repast is the true communion, the genuine flesh and blood. This is the authentic endowment." He drew nearer. I glanced upwards as he drifted past the kneeling figures, seeming to float, his hand brushing against them as if they were pitiable creatures. "The world has overlooked you," he declared, "but I have not." Then he reached me, his cold, metallic hand glided across my shoulder. I shall never forget that touch. It was chilling. The smooth, silver-clad hand sent a shiver that coursed through my entire being. My breath hitched, my throat constricted, my back was drenched in perspiration. Colton observed the encounter with a fixed, resolute gaze, witnessing mortality itself brush against me. I will concede this much: whatever that entity was, it might indeed have been divine, or something far more malevolent. "You are my chosen people," the prince continued, moving past me towards the kitchen and his throne. "You are the ones worthy of me in this debased world. You are my flock, and in you I find delight." He paused beside his throne and surveyed the kneeling congregation. If I were to estimate, there were at least 100 of us, perhaps more. I could not perceive his face, but I sensed that whatever lay concealed behind the mask was pleased. "Initiates," the prince proclaimed, his voice ringing with triumph, "let the welcoming of the new souls commence." Those garbed in white sprang into action like hounds receiving a command. Initially, it appeared disorganized, yet somehow each knew precisely their designated task. Some proceeded towards the entrance through which we had arrived, others began clearing the tables, and a few stepped to the ends of the rows. Without a solitary utterance or gesture, the kneeling destitutes rose. The same occurred at our table. A middle-aged woman approached the end. She spoke no words, merely cast her gaze over us. That was sufficient. The others immediately stood and began to move towards her. Colton followed them without hesitation. I truly possessed no option. I feigned compliance and stood as well. We formed orderly lines, in pairs, much like schoolchildren being escorted. We followed the woman in white through a protracted, winding procession. By some means, Colton and I managed to position ourselves adjacently. I could discern that he was maintaining his composure, exercising control like a soldier, but he was as terrified as I was. "Colton," I whispered, "what shall we do? What transpires now?" "I do not know," he murmured quietly, "but we must depart from this place." The assembly advanced in precise, organized formations, 2 by 2, retracing our path into a lengthy corridor lined with lecture rooms. The woman led us into one of them. Akin to an instructor guiding her pupils, Colton and I followed. I had no inkling of when he intended to act or how. However, with each step, I felt as though our prospects of escaping with our lives were diminishing. Within, the chamber was replete with seating, rows upon rows of it, resembling a university lecture hall. The initial rows were lower, with the rear rows ascending behind them. Everything was arranged such that the stage at the front was clearly visible. A solitary doorway stood at the stage's edge. A bald, middle-aged man clad in white awaited there, a smile gracing his lips as we slowly occupied the seats. No jostling, no confusion. Everyone seemed to intuitively know their designated place. We maintained the pretense and sat down as well. Fortunately, we found ourselves at the termination of a row. Colton occupied a seat between myself and a rigidly faced, unmoving middle-aged woman. I was positioned precisely on the edge, nearest to the stairs and the entrance, closest to an escape route. Once all were seated, the bald man on stage stepped forward. A broad grin spread across his countenance. "Now that each has found their position," the woman who had guided us in announced, her voice almost ceremonial. "My companions, heed the sacred pronouncements. Listen to the concealed doctrines that our Lord, the Prince, has unveiled to us. Be blessed. Let the initiation commence." The bald man turned and vanished through the doorway behind him, only to reappear momentarily. Then he re-emerged, and I swear I wished I had not witnessed what he brought with him. He wheeled out a figure in a wheelchair. If one could even term it a person any longer, the form was unclothed. Its arms were absent from the elbows down. Clean amputations, old, its eyelids were missing. So too were its lips, surgically removed. But the most grievous aspect was its throat. A colossal incision marred its neck. From it, thick metallic conduits protruded, several of them resembling the pipes of a musical instrument. They extended at various angles, glinting under the illumination. The entire being bore little resemblance to humanity anymore. I was rendered speechless, as was Colton. He merely stared at the stage with that same stoic expression. "Merciful heavens," someone whispered behind me. I glanced back. A young man occupied a row behind us, dirty, emaciated. His eyes were wide with abject terror, his hand clamped over his mouth. I am going to perish here," he articulated, his voice now louder, his features contorted with dread, tears welling in his eyes. He was on the precipice, a single push away from complete emotional collapse. "Silence yourself," I implored, turning halfway towards him. "Remain tranquil, compose yourself, or we shall all perish." He regarded me with confusion, still obscuring his face. "You too?" he inquired, a flicker of hope in his tone. "You did not partake either. You are not like them?" "No," I hissed. "Now cease your noise. They will detect you." "Behold my companions," the bald man on stage declared loudly. "Contemplate our hallowed one. Attend to his purified, celestial voice." The entity in the wheelchair began to emit a sound, a low, aberrant vibration. The conduits in its throat shifted subtly, as if something within them were in motion. Perhaps it was attempting to hum, perhaps to speak, but the sound intensified progressively, becoming louder and louder. I felt it initially in my ears, the pressure mounting, my eardrums straining against the escalating volume. Then in my chest, a vibration, rattling something deep within me. A sharp, splitting headache ensued. But the others, they experienced something distinct, something more potent. Almost all of them simultaneously entered a state of profound trance. Their bodies began to convulse violently, heads jerking backward and forth, hands scrabbling at the fabric of their armrests, their legs kicking out uncontrollably as if seized by convulsions, as if they were no longer human. The figure on stage persisted, the sound now blaring through those metallic tubes, an intolerable, piercing cacophony. I could barely restrain myself from covering my ears. The youngster behind us succumbed to despair. Weeping uncontrollably, Colton remained inert, unreactive, merely fixated on the spectacle. "Colton." I leaned in close so he could hear me above the din. "What do we do? What happens now?" He did not reply immediately. He continued to observe the stage. Then he leaned in close to my ear. "Noah," he whispered, "do you still possess the blade I provided you?" That implement in my pocket, I had acquired it from Colton, or rather, I had safeguarded it for him. How could I possibly have forgotten its origin? Back when my relationship with him was still amicable, early in my tenure on the streets, it became apparent that the fellow was not entirely sound. He likely never had been, but the war had exacerbated his condition. One day, he rushed towards me, babbling incoherently about I know not what, thrust a folding knife into my hand, instructed me to conceal it, and then vanished. A few days later, the authorities apprehended him. He had assaulted someone on the street. I never ascertained the precise reason, only that the victim did not perish, but sustained severe injuries. Colton received a 3-year sentence, and the evidence had been residing in my pocket all along. "Yes, I have it," I confirmed, gripping the small, plastic-handled knife concealed within my jacket. Colt nodded, then leaned in once more. I could perceive it on his visage. The sound emanating from the figure on stage was affecting him as well. "I have a strategy, but you must adhere precisely to my instructions," he whispered. I nodded, attempting to adjust my shoulder upwards towards my ear to muffle the noise. It was agonizing, akin to a metallic shriek drilling directly into my skull. "Then relinquish the blade to me," Colton requested, extending his hand. I hesitated. Why? Why at such a critical juncture? I do not know, but something about his expression seemed amiss. I could tell he desired an escape as fervently as I, however. There was something else present as well, something I could not quite articulate. The instant I withdrew the knife from my pocket, Colton snatched it with the swiftness of a hawk, flicking it open in a single, fluid motion. He cast a glance at me, a mere fleeting look, but it sufficed. Whatever semblance of Colton remained was no longer present. It all transpired in a blur. He half rose from his seat, spun around, and plunged the blade directly into the neck of the convulsing woman seated beside the terrified youngster behind us. Blood spattered everywhere. The child was instantly drenched in it, and whatever composure he had retained shattered completely. He screamed, "Infidel!" Colton bellowed. "The infidels must perish." The convulsing assembly ceased almost instantly. As if a switch had been flipped, every individual among them turned towards the shrieking boy, fixing him with a stare like a pack of predators. "Infidel!" The bald man on stage also roared. "The infidel must perish." The congregation, silent mere moments before, descended upon the boy in unison. He screamed, thrashed, and writhed like a wild animal caught in a snare. I remained frozen, observing the unfolding horror. Then I felt a hand grasp me and yank me from my seat. Colton. I do not even recall how he extricated himself from the row. But there he was, gripping my arm with what remained of his. "Move!" he shouted. "We must escape this place." He afforded me no time for contemplation. He simply dragged me along. The assembly was still mauling the boy behind us. His screams continued to reverberate through the chamber. Colton was already sprinting towards the exit. Just a few more steps, and we would be free. But then something materialized in our path. A disheveled, long-haired man, ragged, standing before Colton. He remained immobile, simply gazing at him with a wild, vacant expression. "Infidel," he muttered. "Unbelie." Colton did not hesitate. He lunged at him like a feral creature, blade in hand, but the thrust did not connect properly. It merely grazed the man's arm, and that proved sufficient. They collided, struggling, grappling. I became paralyzed, uncertain of my course of action. "Reach the door," Colton commanded, pinning the man against the wall with one arm, choking him. "Make a path." That jolted me into action. I ran directly towards the double doors through which we had entered. I flung them open. The corridor lay immediately ahead. "Turn left, the exit is there. That is it, just run." I cast a glance backward. Chaos, bodies piled atop one another amidst the rows. The entity in the wheelchair remained on stage, now silent. The boy was no longer screaming. Colton was still engaged in combat. What do I do? The question struck me with force. Should I assist him? Should I rescue him after what he had just done, after sacrificing that boy and dispatching that woman? Or would he subsequently surrender me to them if it meant preserving himself? I was afforded no opportunity to decide, for as I turned back towards the corridor, I ran directly into one of the prince's throne bearers. Up close, he was even more colossal. His entire being was adorned with carved symbols and script I could not decipher. I did not obtain a clear view. I lacked the time. He seized my hoodie at the chest and propelled me into the corridor as if I weighed nothing. I slammed forcefully against the wall. The next instant, I found myself on the ground, disoriented, gazing upwards at him. Then I realized he was not alone. The prince stood behind him, seemingly suspended. His white robes almost luminous under the artificial lights, the lamb masks gleaming like polished metal in the sterile brilliance. "Fear not, Noah," the prince intoned, his voice resonating like metal. "You may yet find solace in my presence." My body trembled. Even if I had desired to move, I doubt I could have. Then something crashed through the doorway behind them. Colton, covered in blood, clutching the knife, he charged directly at them. The immense man reacted swiftly, but not with sufficient speed. Colton drove the blade into his abdomen. It did not fell him. It did not even impede him. Like a maddened bull, the giant seized Colton by the neck and hoisted him off the ground as if he were insignificant. "Infidels," the prince stated quietly, stepping back. That was it. I fled. I did not contemplate. I did not look back. I simply ran for the exit. I struck the doors with such force that they flew open, scattering the figures in white who stood guard outside. I paused for a mere second, then turned back. Colton was already on the ground. His neck bent at an unnatural angle. The giant remained standing, blood pouring from his abdomen, the knife protruding from him, and the prince simply observed me through that silver mask. I could not discern his face, but I swear it felt as though he was disappointed, as if I had abandoned him. Then the doors behind them burst open, the crowd spilled forth, an army of the indoctrinated coming for me. So I ran as fast as my legs could carry me, through the night, through the half-awakened metropolis, directly into the encroaching darkness. I felt as though I had run beyond the confines of the world itself. Perhaps I had. I left everything behind, Colton, the prince, my former existence, all of it. I am presently endeavoring to rebuild, striving to avoid a return to destitution, attempting to forge a life that bears some resemblance to normalcy once more. But that day has never departed from me. The fear has never left me. I live in constant dread that one day I shall turn around and perceive them behind me, that blood-soaked assembly still in pursuit, or one of those smiling figures in white, or worse, that the prince will locate me, because now he is aware of my identity. Wow, rest in peace, Colton. The one-armed, one-eyed veteran truly came through in the end. I suppose Colton was, in a way, the reason he remained in that location in the first place, so it is a full circle of sorts, but at least he made the ultimate sacrifice to ensure his escape. However, yeah, after experiencing such a predicament, if I were the original poster, I would be relocating to an entirely different country because you would constantly be looking over your shoulder, anticipating that unnerving smile or the prince behind that mask, like, yes, Noah, I would be 100% moving thousands of miles away from wherever this incident transpired. Anyway, a massive acknowledgement to the author, More Tanks, for the phenomenal narrative. If you all wish to explore more of their creative output, the links are provided in the description below, and also, as always, a tremendous shout out to my channel members. Thank you immensely for your unwavering support of the channel. If you all desire to further contribute to the channel's sustenance, that link will also be present in the description. However, it is by no means mandatory, entirely optional. With that said, I shall see you all tomorrow. Peace.